Up first, we have Mr. Christain Haseleu from MTSU and Education.
I started at MTSU in 1978, the 78-79 academic year. I came to Nashville / Murfreesboro from the San Francisco Bay Area. I had been working as a mastering technician for GRT Corporation, GRT Records, Janus Records. At GRT, we worked on some really great product because they had the contracts for ABC. So anything that was done by ABC on the West Coast came through us. So there was some Grateful Dead stuff. There was various, I believe some Tom Petty, if I remember correctly, Rolling Stones. Later stuff, but a vast majority of the work that we did was custom product, which meant anybody that wanted 508 tracks or 500 cassettes or 500 albums would send in a tape, and a lot of it was gospel music, and some of it was some really bad gospel music, and so we spent a lot of time listening to not very good music. That's one of the things you get to do when you're a mastering engineer. Whatever comes in, and that's what you have to work on. And sometimes it's great, and a lot of times it's not so good. I had always enjoyed teaching, always enjoyed school. And when I was in graduate school at San Francisco State, I had an assistantship, and I was teaching there and really enjoyed that. So I enjoy the academic lifestyle. I enjoy being amongst the students. But I knew the audio, and I was sitting in the mastering lab one afternoon and read in Billboard magazine that there was a position open at this school that I had never heard of, Middle Tennessee State University, but in Murfreesboro, which I had heard of, in Nashville, of course, and I thought, well, I'll try the academic thing. If it doesn't work, I'm surely can get a job in Nashville. So I came on out, and the academic thing worked out very well for me. Well, coming into Murfreesboro from the West Coast was a real culture shock, I can tell you that. But the other thing I think I need to say is that coming into Nashville, the Nashville industry was very open and welcoming to someone from out of town, someone teaching at MTSU. There are a number of people who have been awarded Lifetime Achievements Awards who were very friendly to me, welcoming to me, invited me into their studios or their places of business. The Audio Engineering Society was great in welcoming me, and of course they were great with the students having their meetings. They let the students come to their meetings, and it made coming to Nashville and Middle Tennessee a whole lot easier. And I really appreciated that then. I really appreciate it now. So I was always like many people, I think, in this area, I was always kind of a geek. So I had a little tape machine when I was in junior high that we would tape our get-togethers and learned how to splice tape. I was the guy that did the Bell and Howell projector and set up the auditorium for the students. In high school, same thing, stagecraft, that kind of thing. And when I got into college, there was a campus radio station, and of course we were all interested in underground radio at that time. This was in the late 1960s, and so I worked at the radio station. We had a left-wing news program that was probably the most commented on program at the WKUOP. That was his call letters. And we would take a couple of Shure vocal masters and a handful of mics and go down to the local pizza parlor and record the local band. So when I left college, I had a radio background, and I thought that's where I wanted to go, was into radio. And so I went to San Francisco State to study radio so I could get a job in an underground FM radio station. And I happened to arrive at San Francisco State when they had just completed a brand new recording studio, not a radio studio, but a recording studio. It had not one, but two 4-track tape machines in this recording studio. And they had a professor who ran that, Paul Cortland Smith, was an old Hollywood engineer. And I just, by the time I was done, I had forgotten about radio, and I was all about working in a recording studio and working with music creatively. And that all came about at San Francisco State. But along the way, I'd taken some electronics courses, and then when I got to MTSU, they wanted me to pursue some additional studies beyond the master's, and so that's where I got into arts management and industrial psychology and that kind of thing, because those were things, since there weren't any audio courses to take other than the ones I was teaching, those were ways that I could advance my career. Well, the program at that point, recording industry was part of a Department of Mass Communication, which was an up-and-coming department at Middle Tennessee State. But the program was a few years old. There was one full-time faculty member. I was the second full-time faculty member. The other faculty member, Dr. Jeff Hall, was teaching the business and law, and I was brought in to teach the audio. There were approximately 60 majors in recording industry at that time, and it was actually declining some from the previous couple of years. And I think MTSU at that time had about 12,000 students.
Contributing editor with Mix Magazine, how did that come about?
Well, of course, Mix Magazine was originally headquartered in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I knew some of the individuals involved in the very early years of Mix Magazine. And so when I came out to Nashville, they contacted me and asked if I was interested in writing for them, and of course I was. And I wrote with a colleague, Dennis Buss, who was on the business side of things, and we did articles having mostly to do with studio business and administration, booking, finding clients, taking care of the administration side of studios, mostly what we wrote about. And we did some specialty things on some local artists, that kind of thing as well. So I did that, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, something like that.
So this MTSU Center for Recording Arts and Sciences, founder and director, what is this?
Well, that was the grant that we got in the 1980s, and that allowed us to build what is now known as our Studio C, which is our first real studio that was designed by Bob Todrank, and we had our Neotech console in there and our 16-track tape machine. That lasted for about 5 years, if I remember correctly, until there was a change of administrations in Nashville, and then that money stream dried up. And what we did was we took the Center for Recording Arts and what was then the Recording Industry Program and combined them to create the Recording Industry Department. So that's how the department came to be.
I went to MTSU. I promised my mother I would get a college education, and I was already thought I was going to be this world-famous engineer and that I was going to go on the road and work sound for everybody, and it was easy for me to go to MTSU and still get on in vans and buses and go work sound for people on the weekend. And Chris was one of my advisors, and Chris was a good engineer. I've learned a lot from him. But he was always bending over backwards to make sure that I didn't get thrown completely out of school. And it was nip and tuck a lot, but Chris would always go, Blake, I'll help you out here, but you got to show up for this, and you got to do this. And in turn, I remember he had an artist that he was working with named Billy Bees, and he said, if you'll mix a side or something for me on Billy Bees, I'll help you out in this class over here and whatnot. And I think we talked about, they didn't have live sound classes up there at the time, so I would talk to the classes about live sound and kind of do those things. But Chris was so good to me, and he didn't have to be, but he really cared. And that, you know, when you're in those situations, you've got all those kids, I'm sure drives you crazy, but he really cared about making sure people, got their money's worth and learned and given opportunity to try to make something of themselves.
In terms of facilities, we had a 12x4 Auditronics console and a 4-track Atari and a 2-track Atari. A handful of microphones, a couple of compressors, an Orban spring unit reverb. We were actually housed in a circular building that was an environmental simulation laboratory. So it was a very uncomfortable space to work in, frankly. And very quickly we moved out of that space into the Haynes house, which was an old house on the side of campus. So it was very Nashville. Having a studio in an old house, the saying in Nashville, of course, is let's buy a studio and convert it into an old house, and that's sort of what we did. But pretty quickly we moved to from 4-track to 8-track to 16-track, bought a Hickerson console. We had that house all to ourselves so we could make as much noise as we wanted to. And that became the studio for the first 5 or 6 years that I was here. From then, we got a grant from the state, and we were able to bring Bob Todrank in and build what is now known as Studio C, and that was a dedicated studio space. Really a wonderful control room, stepped up to a 16-track tape machine with a, at first it was a Neotech console, and very quickly after that, we went to an SSL 4000. And after that, the Bragg building came online. That was about 1990 when we had our 2 big studios and our MIDI lab and our post area. So we were really uptown when the Bragg building opened in 1990.
I met Chris Haseleu after being a guest speaker at MTSU. Subsequently, he asked me if I would mind teaching his record label class, which was dormant due to a lack of activity. And my wife and son were both taught by Chris, so I was honored to be asked by him. But I had never had any teaching experience. So he said, Dick, don't worry about it. You've had experience with your own publishing company and management company and your own record company, and you've been an executive vice president for a major record company. You're a natural for this. You don't have to worry about it. Just think of it as a smaller version of that. So he said, just write up a syllabus for me because I need that so that the kids know what the class is about. So I'm thinking, here's what it's like to work for a real record company, sans the profanity. I know that after several years of working with Chris, he's one of the best people at negotiating. In fact, he negotiated that deal with me when I wasn't even aware of it. So congratulations, Chris. Your recognition is well deserved.
It was a time when, initially, of course, of those 60 students, I had every single student, at least one course. Of course, later that, it was 1,700, you didn't get every student. You're lucky if you learned a handful of them. But, when it came time to retire, I was happy to ease into retirement with just a few courses, and I'm still actually teaching adjunct. So it's great. You get a class at 12 students. You get to learn a little bit about everybody, and some of them make some friends along the way. Some of them keep in touch. Some of them don't. But I see a lot of my earlier students, particularly on Facebook, and we still keep in touch. Highlights. The building of the building that we're in now, the Bragg building, was a huge highlight. Getting to work with Russ Berger and having the kind of budget that we had, that was a huge highlight. The students were always great to work with, and we did a lot of album projects early on and later CD projects where the students would submit their work and we would judge it out and get them duplicated and getting the artwork together. That was always great. Working with the faculty, particularly hiring faculty, was always a lot of fun. Bringing people in and learning about them and being able to offer them a job was always great. So a lot of those kind of things is the things that I remember. But you were talking about highlights. One of the great things that I think about is the fact that the recording program grew. the audio portion of the program grew. We were able to add a songwriting concentration in there. We were able to add a Master of Fine Arts program in audio in there. So all that development happened during the decade that I was the department chair, and I'm really proud of the things that were accomplished when I was department chair.
Chris, thank you for everything that you did to help us, and me especially, and you deserve this award, and I don't know how you lasted up there as long as you did, quite honestly, but congratulations.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Christain Haseleu.
On behalf of the Nashville AES section, it is an honor for me to present you with this Lifetime Achievements Award. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, I said I had 15, 20 minutes here. Wasn't that right? I don't know what I can add to that video. I didn't realize how well it would turn out. I will tell you that 40 years ago, I left the left coast with everything I owned in the back of a Datsun pickup truck. You remember Datsun? And I drove out to Nashville to take a job in Middle Tennessee, where they had a little program, 60 students at the time, a little 4-track studio that shared a control room with air handlers for the lab. It was not a lot of fun. But I arrived in Nashville knowing no one and having no support group whatsoever. But I was a member of the Audio Engineering Society, and they welcomed me, an outsider with limited experience and doing a job that some of them didn't really think was that necessary, but they let me in their studios and their offices, and they helped me every step of the way. There are a number of people, some of whom are being recognized today and others who have been previously recognized, who were instrumental in helping me. And I hesitate to list names because I'm going to forget somebody, but there are a few that I want to name because they were so important to the success that I had and the program had in Murfreesboro. If I forget anybody, just please excuse me, but I want to mention Johnny Rosen and Claude Hill, Denny Purcell. I so miss Denny. Bob Malloy, Lee Hazen, Glenn Snoddy, Graham Goodall, Dave Purple, Bob Toddrank, Tom Clark, Linda Albright, Glenn Meadows, Mylan Bogdan, Mike Porter, Frank Wells are those that I can still remember. I'm sure I'm forgetting many. 40 years later, MTSU has gone from 10,000 to 22,000, and those 60 majors are over 1,100 majors. And the audio production concentration now includes live sound, broadcast audio, sound for picture, and music technology. And the 2 courses that were there when I started are now 30 courses with over 15 faculty and staff. I'm semi-retired now. I do still teach a couple of courses. I just finished a course entitled Analog Recording in the Modern Music Production Process, or as I call it, Old Tricks for New Dogs. My plans for the future are a little vague, but I thought I might follow that advice you hear a lot in Nashville, and that is to buy a studio and turn it into an old house. So I may try that. But I need to thank my beautiful wife for her support all along, and for my friends and colleagues, some of whom are here today.
And I especially want to thank the Nashville section of the Auto Engineering Society and the committee for this award, which is unexpected, but very, very appreciated. Thank you very much.